what do you mean sweat the small stuff? Yes, sweat it a lot, because that is your retention right there.
Right. The small stuff communicates your standards. Welcome to the Trustedpreneur podcast, where we give you the strategies, mindsets, and the frameworks to grow and scale your business with confidence. Today's message is a bold reminder in a world that talks about only look at the big picture. We're going to flip that a little bit on its head to remind you that if you don't sweat the small stuff, you're setting yourself up for a big, eye-opening failure. Success lives in the details. Madeline, why do the little things matter, and how do they create the big result?
From my perspective, how you do one thing is how you do everything, right? And so, and I'll give you an example of that. I recently went to my esthetician to do my facial, and she missed one step of the process that I so enjoy and is the reason why I go to her. And it's as simple as massaging my face once she's done with my facial. And she missed that day. And I know she was going through something, but I fell off. Like, to me, it was like, wait a minute, there's something missing. And it was so important to me. Well, it was so small, it was important enough for me to mention it. And I told her, I said, I typically get a massage after my facial, and I didn't this time. She felt bad, right? She skipped a process, right? And so often we go to places not because you can get it anywhere else. It's because of the little things that people do for you, right? A massage in your calves, even though it's not part of the process, right? But it felt good. So to me, those little things matter. And in business, matter even more.
And those little things, even if it in a scenario like what you're describing, because I remember you came home with that story.
I know.
And I said, I remember asking, was there a reason she didn't do it? And there actually was, but what she didn't do is spend a little bit of time in the detail of explaining to you, hey, Madeline, on this one, or on this particular day, I'm not going to be able to deliver that for you. Mm-hmm. Now, I also want to give her a shout out because she told you to come in and get your facial massage, which is awesome.
And it's not to mouth her at all.
No.
This is just an example of how little things matter.
Right. And the thing is what a lot of people don't realize is it's the little things that they don't think, like you said, are really that big of a detail, right? So I remember this coming up in a conversation, and a person didn't understand why their client didn't stick with them. And it was a simple thing when they went in and they found out and they looked into it, right? It wasn't the product or service. Mm-hmm. It was that their email sequencing was so poorly put together that it didn't drive them to do what the email sequencing is supposed to do, mm-hmm. is remind them about them, continue to create brand awareness, mm-hmm. and ultimately retention.
Right.
And those details are all about the retention, right? And it's no different than when we, in our business, if we or one of our agents gives a poor experience, and it could be that they didn't go through the process the way it should have been or the way somebody expected, that person remembers it and they call the client and say, hey, I don't know what was going on, but this isn't what should have happened.
Right.
And sometimes they don't know the details we provide, but what we do know is they have expectations. And in this this is a kind of a recent story for us. We went on an amazing Ritz cruise.
Oh, yeah.
And we didn't know what to expect. It's the Ritz. It's going to be nice. It was nice yacht, right? Small group. But from the moment we stepped foot, not on the boat, it was a step foot into getting, received and all that, right? Get our passports
the
all done.
onboarding process.
Their onboarding, literally to get on board, was amazing in how they treated you. The simple, would you like some water? Would you like a cool towel?
Right.
Would you like this? Oh,
the small stuff.
Mrs. Ritchie, we have you here. Oh, that's a wonderful, et cetera, et cetera. Then we got on board.
And then
it was game over, right? Yeah. Because it was like, holy cow, could you possibly give better service? But it was in the details. Everything was a detail. Right. And, for example, we happened to be celebrating our anniversary. They remembered. They did something special for us every evening, right? How amazing was that? And what was the first thing we did? We told everybody.
Yes, we did.
Right? And so their little detail was amazing because it got us to refer. And I know at least one or two people that have decided, hey, I'm going to check that out. I'm going to do that.
Yeah. And people don't understand why that happens, right? And what do you mean sweat the small stuff? Yes, sweat it a lot, because that is your retention right there.
Right.
Because anybody can go get a facial anywhere. You go to places because of how they make you feel, right? Like you said, the one scenario where the customer unsubscribed because of the bad sequence of emails. Right. That person did not take the time to give that other person an experience. And that's critical. And I don't understand why, if you start with something, keep it across the board, be consistent.
Yep.
That's another thing. Don't take it away.
Right. Well, I totally agree. And I think that, so some strategic kind of examples or details, right? So you mentioned the onboarding experience. We always say, and I know it's on one of our future episodes, but onboarding is the start of retention. I actually believe it starts before that sometimes, right? Because the experience somebody has while they're being sold or offered a product or a service, right? How that is handled helps them get to the onboarding process, right? So they're already measuring you on the small stuff. And I think it's funny. I can have the best website out there. I can have the best lead magnets out there. But if I don't do something really, really great when they're in the process of it, they're lost.
Yeah.
They don't feel like they're being listened to or heard. They don't feel like they're being seen. So to me, that's where a lot of these companies out there say, oh, just go for the big. Well, if you do, you'll never know what you're not getting.
Well, it's funny because that also goes into, as I think about it, a lot of people want to launch programs and products viable, but have no plan on making it better. That if they're making money on the viable, they're going to just go with it, right? But honestly, and it's not about perfectionism either, because they're probably going to take it to the extreme, right? It has to be perfect. It just has to make people feel good. It has to have the components of one that doesn't want to leave you, the kind of brand that wants to tattoo their names on themselves, right? That's what's critical about sweating the small stuff.
Well, the small stuff communicates your standards, right? And so when you think about that, right? So recently we were working with a business, and we went through part of the, we were already through the onboarding, and we're already noticing, hey, there's a lot of gaps here. And then we went into the next level, and we're like, well, wait a minute. What am I getting here? Right? Because we were already thinking that it wasn't valuable, or it wasn't as valuable as it could have been, right? Because they weren't taking the time to enhance the experience. Now, I'm not suggesting that on the bigger picture, sometimes the big items aren't part of the experience. Of course they are. But the big items are the product. The big items is the service. The details is the experience.
Right. The detail it's what creates the big results.
Right. And I think when you're dealing with high-level clients, right? If you're a small business or you're a business and you're trying to transition to a more larger ticket item, the larger the ticket, the more the details matter, right? That's why the Ritz cruise example is so good, because it wasn't the average priced cruise, but it delivered every dollar spent, right? So the big ticket or the big item was the cruise. But what's going to make us go back, right? And so I think that's such a critical point. And that's why when you don't sweat the small stuff, right, bad things can happen, right?
Well, then you start thinking, is the difference between nice and I can't live without it, right? It's nice. Oh, this, I can't live without it. It just moves. It moves from this to this, right?
Right.
It's from respectable to replaceable.
Yes. Right. Because what's the added value, right?
Right.
And I think that is something that a lot of times leaders don't necessarily understand is, they're leading their teams, but they may be leading them in what they believe is to be a more profitable way because they're cutting out some things, right? But, there's a funny story when you and I and Nina went to Milwaukee.
Yes, that story is funny.
And we went shopping, right? And we went to this little boutique, and it was kind of cute and it was fun. And I was not necessarily in my element. You guys were. And Nina was looking for some stuff, and you were helping her get some new clothes and things like that. And the first thing they do is sit me down
and a nice couch
and a really nice, a really nice sofa, right? And I'm getting a sparkling water in a glass. And I'm like, uh-oh.
Yes.
But you guys were getting served so well. And you know what? When we got to the register, I looked at that and I said, really? For a pair of jeans? But the reality was the experience was so good.
Right.
That the attention to making sure you and Nina didn't have to actually think in the process. You were part of the process.
Right.
Right. Then it was like, okay, then, it's a little bit more than I probably would normally spend on something like this, but I'm okay because the experience was amazing.
Right.
And other than that, I made sure I finished all the sparkling water.
Yeah. And from a tactical standpoint, it's not about perfectionism. Let's just make sure that we understand that. It's not that you have to be perfect in what you're doing. It's that you have to be intentional with what you're doing and how you're the little things, right? And I'll tell you, one of our investors, one of our brand that we invest in, there's something that they do amazingly well. And it was funny because there was a friend of mine that went to visit and said, her husband said, well, I can get you one of those, And it says, unless you're going to receive me at the door with a eucalyptus towel, I am not interested, And so, again, it's the little stuff. And we did it at the boutique gym that we own, right? After they were done with their workout, they received a towel that was made with so much intention and love, dipped in lavender. And it was a cool towel. Nothing's magnificent. It was just the intention behind it. and how they made them feel. And they talked about that towel all the time. In the days that we didn't have them because we ran out, they were not happy, right? And so those types of things, right? I mean, it's really being intentional with the remember, strategy.
But and this is how sweating the details, right? Because there was a process to have those towels done, everything else. So what we did in the event that ever happened again, we purchased. Now they weren't the same quality, they weren't everything else, but we said, hey, our shipment is a little bit late, but we have these instead. And while they didn't feel it was the same, they appreciated that we took the step to accommodate something they were used to, right? And to me, I think that's a great point, right? Because you have to remember, even if you run out of something, they're still looking for it.
Right. And that also goes on the onboarding. Is your onboarding flowing perfectly? Right. And are you delivering a task, or are you delivering an onboarding experience? That's big difference, right? So when we talk about tactics and being intentional and not look for perfectionism, it's that, right? Your email, did it flow right? Right? Did it make that person feel how it's supposed to, right? What did we miss on that? Was the language clear, right? The next level visuals, does your aesthetic match your authority? That's another thing, right? When you show up for your clients, how do you show up for your clients, even though it's virtual?
Right.
Right? I mean, do you have a hat on, or do you have your leggings, or you just came from the gym and you're just going to go do a discovery call like that, right? Where's the respect, right? So those are the types of things that we talk about when we talk powerful tactics that are sweating the small stuff. I understand that, the industry has changed and a lot of things have changed, but we should be respectful of that client that's on the other end as well, right?
Right. And when you talk like that or about that, what you're really understanding more is it's more than just your brand, right? It's credibility for your brand and the behaviors that they expect. So to me, that's huge because, marketing is getting your brand out there. That's great. But cementing the brand that gets you referrals, right? That gets you the 5-star ratings. That's the stuff that comes from the details, right?
Yeah.
I think one of the other things that I wanted to say is when you start having fractions or conflict within the small details, now your big vision is being impacted, right? Because you're not living up to the expectations and now you're putting out the little fires.
Right.
Right. And so, I remember using the studio, we literally scripted what they needed to say when somebody opened the door. We scripted what they had to say. We scripted it until they could make it their own. But
sure.
But the point is we had a message that we wanted delivered on every client, whether it was their first time or their 100th time.
Right.
We wanted them to experience it over and over again because, as we said, when you talk about onboarding, it is part of your retention strategy. And if you are giving an experience only because they're brand new, then you're going to have runoff at the end because that person bought because of the experience,
right? Not
the degradation of experience.
Right, because details set the stage for the standards.
Yeah.
Right? That's your standard. Whatever detail it is, that is your standard.
Yeah.
And so, high-level clients, they notice everything because their standards are high. That's what they call high-level clients.
Right.
So it's important that you always want to exceed those expectations, right? That's your signature. That is what you're known for.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
So just to kind of get a couple finals, wrap up on this topic, because I think it's really powerful. Some of the takeaways we want people to come away with, right? Is sweat the small stuff, but do it with strategy. Have a purpose for doing it. Don't, listen, I'm going to give everybody a pen when they go into my fitness studio. Okay, why? Right? But I'm going to have a purposeful detail that they're going to enjoy and they're going to enhance their experience. Details, as we said, are brand builders. They're, people don't think about them as building their brand, but those details are what builds reputation. Reputation builds your brand in referrals. Yeah. Precision is power. Delivering everything is critical, but it has to be timely. It can't be I forgot to do this. It has to be part of their routine that every customer, every person you interact with goes through that process. And, I think when you think about that, that's the difference between the business going from 6 figures to 7 figures to 10 figures.
Well, yeah.
They're constantly enhancing the details that they're delivering in their experience. And, you said something interesting, and I want to pause.
I did.
You did. I love that.
Okay.
High-level clients.
I get a mark here.
High-level clients. It does not always mean that they are spending a lot of money.
Huh? Tell me about that.
Because high-level clients, really, if people really think about it, we're not talking high-ticket clients. We're talking high-level. High-level clients is every client. Every client should be treated like a high-level client. Your high-ticket is just price.
Oh, interesting perspective.
So people think, well, I don't, that's why Chick-fil-A, go to a Chick-fil-A if you're in the South, and what do they say after you leave? It was my pleasure, right? Yeah. And if you don't experience that, you miss it. But that's not a big ticket item. That's just a high-level client that they're giving a high-level experience. And I think people misunderstand that. It's not just because they're spending a lot of money.
So everybody should be, what you're saying is that everybody should be put on a pedestal regardless of their level. But in this case, I'm talking about high-level clients that understand.
No, I get it.
What that is, and their standards are high, because not everybody's standards are high. Like, I have high standards. I monitor every conversation, how they speak to me, who they are, and how much they're charging me to speak to me that way. I do. And let me tell you, not good when they don't meet my expectations.
No, I know. I can talk about a $2 recycling thing if we really want to get down to that, but that's a story for another.
Yeah, that is a story for another day. We're not going to talk about that story right now, but it also is important to understand that we harp on, we want to build trust, right? And the way that we build trust is by delivering high standards.
Right.
Always delivering more than what people expect. Always. But for some unknown reason, people forget. I don't understand that.
And I think that is a great place for us to finish, because it really says what we're trying to say through the whole thing is sweat the small stuff. Details matter. And
precision is power.
And precision is power. So thanks for everybody for listening to the Trustedpreneur podcast. If you found value in this content, please refer this podcast to a business owner that might be not getting deep enough into the details. And if we can assist you in anything, please just give us a DM or a message below, and we will be happy to help you help grow and scale your business. Until next time, we'll see you.
See you soon.